Sunday, January 10th, 2021. I think this is session 15 of Meditation 102. Let's start by setting our intentions using the four immeasurable prayer. And when we say in this prayer, all beings, we do mean all beings. Keep that in mind. It's very important. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. As difficult as a concept that might be, wishing compassion and love and equanimity for all beings, the reality is, if all beings were happy, truly happy, and free from suffering, there would not be anger, hatred, violence, and aggression, and those things. So that's what we're really praying for, right? But it's in a week like this, it's often a tall order to have that expansive view. At least for me, it is. And when things are so difficult and frightening and infuriating, and we have feelings of anxiety and anger and get possessed by them, and they really feel very solidified and solid, and just you feel in the grips of these things. It's hard, watching images on TV and the news, and really have to apply the teachings and the practice, maybe even just to get to sleep at night, to get through the day. A couple of classes ago, I remember someone asking about, I don't remember the full extent of the question, but something like that: if people are deserving of compassion, and is it hard, how do you wish them compassion? And really, we're not talking about people being deserving of your compassion or not. It's about you cultivating compassion. It's not about you cultivating compassion for this one and not this one, or this one or not. It's this general sense. Because when we've spoken about it before, and Vesna Wallace spoke about emptiness and non-duality, and the ultimate reality of things being non-dual, right? So you're not cultivating compassion just on a case-by-case basis, if you will. We're cultivating it with the broader view of non-duality, which is the ultimate reality of existence, if you will. Okay. I had a particularly difficult time this week with anxiety and anger, and this is the big challenge to all of us, and to maintain some kind of center and bigger view. I'm going to read later on, after we meditate, from Garchen Rinpoche, who's someone most of you know is my teacher, who I took refuge with. And he spent 20 years in a labor camp after the Chinese invaded Tibet. Hard labor. So I always try to think of what he would do and how he would respond. The Christians always say WWJD. What would Jesus do? I always say WWGD. What would Garchen do? So let's meditate. That is why we're here. Okay, let's sit for 11 minutes. Okay. I'm going to read from Garchen Rinpoche. A couple of things. I've said this many, many times. I'll just say it again because it's particularly pertinent this week. Buddhism and practice of Buddhism should never be equated with passivity, passive and passive, being in passive like sheep who don't, respond or react to what's going on in their world or in society or things like that. Uh, if you are compelled to be an activist, to engage in social causes in ways that can be affected, that also can be very much part of being a Buddhist. Like Thich Nhat Hanh marched and worked with Dr. Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement in the 60s. The Dalai Lama has been very involved and supportive of many human rights causes, environmental. I think just yesterday he did an online dialogue with Greta Thunberg about the environment. So, being a Buddhist is not just detaching yourself from reality and just like justifying other people's negative actions or accepting them or permitting them or whatever. It's not that. But from our point of view, we have to deal with our own negative emotions that come in response to these situations and events, and how we respond to them, so we can engage with the world as practitioners and as Buddhists without being consumed and possessed by negative emotions and our reality being so completely colored by them. Another thing, our Sangha member Dharma sister Sharon, that many of you know, has taken refuge with Garchen Rinpoche virtually through the website, which I didn't know was a possibility, but because of technology and isolation and COVID restrictions, this has become possible and available. Taking refuge is really officially becoming a Buddhist. You're taking a vow of refuge. You're going to take refuge in the Buddha, which is Buddha, himself, but also your teacher. You take refuge in the Dharma, which are the teachings, and you take refuge in the Sangha, which is the community of Buddhist practitioners. So if any of you are interested and inspired by Garchen Rinpoche and want to become a Buddhist and want to particularly take refuge with him and become a student of his, it's available on the Garchen Buddhist Institute website, GBI website. There's a link. You can take refuge online. You send a little clipping of hair because that's part of the ritual. If you want to take that step and you haven't, or you haven't officially become a Buddhist, or you want to make that link and connection with a teacher, it's available. I will say making that link really brings your practice to another level. It really does. And the Vajrayana teachings, which I'm not going to go into detail about, but they're a set of tantric teachings. It's very complicated to discuss on and I'm not very articulate about explaining it, but it exclusively happens through the connection you make with a teacher. It doesn't happen without that. So if that's something you're interested in, it is available. I'm sure if it's available with Garchen Rinpoche, it's probably available through other teachers as well that inspire you and that you feel a connection to. So let me read. I'm going to read from, it's one of Rinpoche. It's from a book, but I don't think it's published in America yet, or it's not so available, but you can look on the GBI, Garchen Buddhist Institute website, for other books by Rinpoche. I think this is from a book about the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, which is one of his heart teachings, something he teaches very often. Someone who has bodhicitta will exchange his own happiness for the suffering of others. There are some people who naturally have great compassion within their minds. This is because they accumulated merit in past lifetimes. When loving kindness and compassion arise within the mind, there is nothing more meritorious. Thus, what we call merit is really love. For example, if there is a war somewhere and we see pictures of it on TV, naturally we will feel compassion. The suffering will come to our mind, and we will feel a very strong sense of uneasiness and sorrow. At that time, suffering will actually have arisen within us. Then compassion arises from it. Why? Because we love. If we didn't love, compassion would not arise. Then we would just think about making war and being victorious, and think of fighting as like being a game. Someone who has love will understand what is happening and know that the root of this suffering has arisen from the actions committed in previous lifetimes because of self-grasping and the afflictive emotions. Due to karma, all of those people gather in one place and fight. These battles are the results of hatred, attachment, ignorance, and jealousy. What we are attached to is mainly the self. Attachment is primarily the thought, I want. If we do not get what we want, we get angry. When anger arises, jealousy arises. Then because of these, we engage in action. And later, as a karmic result, we come together in one place and kill each other. The root of all this is self-grasping. What do those people need? They need love. They need loving kindness and compassion. They need compassion. Through compassion, their karma can be weakened. Once you have given rise to compassion, you will be all right. Even if a country is engaged in warfare, if all its citizens would give rise to love in their mind streams, then the negative karma of hatred would be purified. And their self-grasping will collapse. Of course, this would not happen instantly, but it will gradually diminish, like snow with sun shining on it. It will gradually melt away. You won't see it decrease from moment to moment, but only in the long term. When you understand the pain that arises from self-grasping, you will be able to transform everything within your mind. You will also engage in the practice of the 6 paramitas with physical and verbal actions, and in the actual practice of exchanging self with others, sending out compassion and taking in the suffering of others. When you have compassion, you will naturally wish to exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others. And when you then witness how naturally this exchange arises, you will develop strong trust in the power of love. Once you give rise to bodhicitta, you engage in the actual practices. This next section is a commentary on practice number 20 from the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas. The text for number 20 reads, if outer foes are destroyed while not subduing the enemy of one's own hatred, enemies will only increase. Therefore, subduing one's own mind with the army of love and compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. And that's the 37 practice by Gulchu Togme. And this, what I'm going to read next is Garchen Rinpoche's commentary, part of his commentary on that section. Failing to recognize an afflictive emotion in the first place is ignorance. I'm going to read that again. Failing to recognize an afflictive emotion in the first place is ignorance. Afflictive emotion, we mean anger or strong attachment, strong desire or jealousy or failing to recognize an afflictive emotion in the first place is ignorance. So ignorance is the root of all. From ignorance arises self-grasping, and from self-grasping arises anger. What is the fault in anger? It is an enemy. The root of all suffering was created by anger, and your anger will produce more suffering in the future. As soon as anger arises, it is like a poison thorn piercing your mind. It has the nature of suffering. Anger has the nature of suffering. Whenever there is anger in the mind, there is always some hostility. You know it just by looking at someone's face. Someone who has, as ignorance has anger, unknowingly his mind becomes unhappy. He becomes harsh, his face becomes harsh, and no one is attracted to such a face. No one wants to come close to him. Then he gets upset because no one likes him. If he thinks his wife and children don't like him, he gets angry. The wife and children are not to blame, but he insults and berates and scowls at them. If you love someone, you smile at them. If you don't smile, nobody wants to come near you, even if they are your parents. In the end, anger will lead to the 3 lower realms. And this week, when the events that happen in the world can really give rise, we can give rise to anger in response to those things, and it may be very hard to, like I said before, have that bigger view and try to cultivate compassion. But in the meantime, at least do no harm. And they say that the Buddhist teachings are very simple. In essence, it's 1, do no harm. It's 2, do good, cultivate virtue. And 3, it's tame the mind. If you can at least do no harm, by that I mean take that anger and just take it out in harsh ways, in negative ways, in very destructive ways. Start with that at least. Okay, let's, if anyone has any questions, we could take some questions. When I see and feel others suffering, I know in this lifetime I will not be able to help all beings who suffer, but I hope this will go into my next lifetime. Yes, it will go into your next lifetime. How do I go about doing that? It's by practicing, and applying the teachings as much as you can, on a continual basis. That's it, really. I don't think there's any other way. The concept of, and this is from Sharon, actually, and we brought up taking refuge. The concept of taking refuge it's not metaphoric. It's not a metaphoric concept. Taking refuge. You're taking refuge from samsara and all that comes with it, like the afflictive emotions and suffering and all those things, and negative emotions. So you're taking refuge from samsara in the Buddha, which also means your teacher, in the Dharma, which are the teachings, and in the Sangha, which is the community of your fellow practitioners, fellow Buddhists. You're taking refuge until you become enlightened. And when you become enlightened, become realized, you won't need to take refuge because you're enlightened. And then, you have realized all these teachings, and you have realized emptiness, and you have realized the nature of reality, and you'll be freed from all this, from suffering and negativity. But until we are there, we take refuge in the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That's what we take refuge in. That's what that's called, the 3 jewels. Sharon says, I just want to come back over and over until all is free, is what I meant. Yes, so you take the Bodhisattva vow. Bodhisattva vow. Until samsara is emptied, I will bring benefit to all beings. Which means, you're not just going to reach a nirvanic state of, removing yourself from the suffering of the world or the worlds or the realms. You're going to continually be in reincarnate until all beings reach enlightenment. That's the Bodhisattva vow. Not a question, but a reflection. The events of this week have only positively reinforced the practice of compassion, that each action, makes good or bad, makes one world. We can and must continue to choose the action of love and compassion. I feel only encouragement. That's very positive, Neil. Thank you for saying that and sharing that. Violet says, hi, I'm very new to this, but how do you balance compassion? Sometimes I start to absorb someone else's pain to the point where I feel like I am suffering. I feel like I used to choose anger to protect myself from feeling pain. When our hearts start to soften, and you become, as they say, moistened with love and compassion, you can feel, you can feel that pain. But the practice of Tonglen, which I hope to have someone, an expert, come on and teach this very soon. And those of you who are interested in it, you should look, you can look online about Tonglen from some maybe even the Dalai Lama. There's might be teachings from him. And it's about a practice where you're using that, where you're taking on other suffering and almost kind of filtering it through your own your own consciousness or your own intention and filtering it away in a sense, because you're not taking on their suffering literally. Someone's probably, if I see someone on TV and they're the victim of poverty in a foreign country, and I use that a practice similar or like Tonglen or something similar and try to take on their suffering as an intention, I'm not literally turning into them, or I'm not putting myself into their literal circumstances. It's more about intention, and so that intention kind of starts to affect your view. Because if indeed there's no separation, and if indeed the ultimate, the ultimate nature of reality is that we are all one, so there is an effect, there is a literal connection. And Violet, I think this is something that as you say you're new to this, the more you study and the more you practice, I think you'll be able to find this balance naturally. It's like anything else when you start it. There's a learning curve, but if it's overwhelming and you feel like you're suffering to the point where it's, too much, or something that's something negative, maybe you need to pull back. I think the best thing, if you're inspired to do this type of practice, is to really look, and you can message me on Instagram. I'll try to find a book that deals with Tonglen. I hope to have a Lama to teach that here, and I'll recommend it, book to you, because I think it's a practice that could really be beneficial to you if you're inspired to do this. It seems like naturally you're inspired to do this kind of practice anyway, and that teaching may be able to give you the balance that you're talking about. So I'm going to think about it, and I'll ask a few people what's a good book or a good teacher. There might be videos online. Maybe even Garchen Rinpoche does it, but I'll try to find something specific. Please say the name of the text you were reading from again. It's Garchen Rinpoche, the 37 practices, his commentary on the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva. So I think it's been published in Asia, but in English, but maybe available on Garchen Rinpoche Garchen Institute website. I feel that my dog, Tessa, is a bodhisattva. Is this a Buddhist understanding, or must bodhisattva be in human form only? I think it is capable for a dog to be a bodhisattva, to be honest with you. You see stories all the time of a dog risking its own life to save somebody or save another being. That's bodhisattva activity. And although in the Buddhist point of view, human life is a more positive one than the dog. So if you and has the potential to really become enlightened, only the human form does. So a dog that is bodhisattva probably will be reincarnated as a human, maybe as a someone who's going to be a Buddhist. Which is why we should treat all beings with compassion and equanimity. Because they all sentient beings have Buddha nature. So in essence, all sentient beings have the capability of being bodhisattva. I have something else I wanted to read today from Zigor Control Rinpoche. Yeah, Zigor Control is a great Tibetan Buddhist Lama. It has some wonderful books, a bunch. So if you want to look him up, you should. But this is something I read of his today. We should know that the basis of being a practitioner is to work with the mind and resolve things within ourselves, rather than focus on changing outer circumstances. Knowing this, at least on some level, is what makes us teachings and teachers. It's what makes us learn and appreciate the Dharma. I'm going to just read the beginning again. We should know that the basis of being a practitioner is to work with the mind and resolve things within ourselves, rather than focus on changing outer circumstances. It's what makes us learn and appreciate the Dharma. This kind of unconventional thinking is one of the main ways by which we can improve our internal environment. The better we get at using it, the more it will become our instinctual response to whatever disturbs our mind. By instinctual response, I don't mean that we will never get angry. Wise Dharma practitioners may still get irritated and even let out some words of aggression, but they can catch themselves and recover their footing quickly, and from there they move confidently toward a better solution. Even when faced with pain in the midst of struggle, they know they can overcome it by applying the wisdom they have understood and practiced. Some may think this approach is unnatural or contrived, but this is how the practice of patience can become a reliable strength. Their growing sense of confidence gives these practitioners a joyful sense of anticipation about working through difficult circumstances. They are wise because they know the difference between wisdom and neurosis, and they always side with wisdom. With this perspective, they have no reason to reject anything that comes up in their lives. They can see all situations as ways for them to learn, grow, and progress. In this, we should again start by practicing in small ways, work with seeing small setbacks and annoyances as blessings, gradually learn to see how unfavorable experiences contribute to your spiritual progress. We have an incredible saying in Tibetan, Yona yoga, me na me chi. This means if you have it, it's a great joy. If you don't have it, it's a great blessing. Applying this kind of philosophy will help you always see that the glass is half full rather than half empty. If you can take this to heart, you will eventually develop a sense of contentment and appreciation in all situations, regardless of outer conditions. Okay. Let's sit again. Let's do 13 minutes. Remember, we're just trying to work with the thoughts and the mind. And as the thoughts arise, just recognize the fact that we're thinking and then go back to the breath. And we can imagine or visualize the thought like a cloud just dissolving into the sky from which it arose, and the sky itself being completely clear, luminous, unstained, untouched by anything that arises or dissolves within it. And it's that constant recognition of the thought and then letting it go. That's the practice. Great. Okay. See if there's any other questions. Jelena says, in my parents' house, we were not allowed to be angry or show anger. So instead, I often transferred anger into sadness. Is sadness also considered a negative emotion? Well, negative emotions, we usually refer to you're referring to the 5 poisons in Buddhism, which is anger, ignorance, desire, attachment, jealousy, and pride. Sometimes they only talk about 3 poisons, which are anger, attachment, ignorance. And sometimes they just talk about ignorance. Ultimately, is the source of all the negative emotions. Ignorance in terms of our, nature of reality, the fact that, the fact of non-duality and the fact of emptiness. And when we fail to recognize those aspects, the other poisons come. There becomes a separation, and there's a creation of the idea of self and other, and then comes anger, then comes jealousy, and those things arise. I don't really know about how anger transforms into sadness. I have heard people say that depression often is anger somehow being manifesting in a specific way, but I don't know, obviously I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist in any way, so I don't know the details of that. Um, but I think the key here is the fact that we do get angry. You aren't allowed to show it. So in not showing it, it manifested in other ways. And I'm not sure about how valuable it is right now to kind of unravel the past. But I think what is valuable is the fact that you are making a commitment to working with negative emotions now in the present, and working with your own mind, in your own mind, which is the source of these negative emotions, and how to work with it. Um, I, I think it can be valuable to look back on the people in your parents, if that's who you're speaking of, and try to have compassion for who they are or who they were at the time, and for yourself and for that situation, and the fact that this is not your reality now. Your reality now is today. You're practicing meditation and learning about compassion and learning ways to implement that into your life and into your mind. So I think that's very positive. The fact that you are committing to that by being here and practicing in whatever way you do, and reading and studying and stuff is a way you're going to create a lot more benefit for others. By by practicing these things is not just for you and not just for ourselves, but it can have that ripple effect in your immediate surroundings, in your immediate circles and family, and then in the world at large. Cake says, how do you know when it's time to take refuge? It's a really good question. I don't know if it's one I can answer for you. How do you know when it's time to propose marriage to someone, fall in love, or express that you're in love with someone, and tell them that. We're living in a difficult time that you're not able to be in the presence of the teacher physically. So often, by being in the presence of the teacher several times, maybe, or over time, you realize you do want this person to be your Lama, take refuge. But we're living in such fast times, you know what I mean? Like, things just change so rapidly, and things arise, and emotions arise, and information comes so rapidly and so incessantly. It's almost like the need to take refuge becomes almost so much more immediate, that the clock is ticking so quickly, it seems. I can't answer that question for you, really. But if you're inspired to, if you are inspired to, it's a good thing to do. But it really has to come from your own heart, and your own understanding of why you want to do it. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah, that's what they say. Not just in Buddhism, but in many spiritual practices. I'm someone who builds up a lot of anger over time when I'm stressed or upset. You are not alone, Joe. As someone who practices meditation in Buddhism, what is the best way from your experience to help channel those feelings? By practicing meditation in Buddhism. That's the best way. By applying the teachings and applying the practice as anger and as these emotions arise in our mind. This is something that gets easier over time, like anything else. You become better and more skilled at handling these negative emotions over time. I mean, the best way is to really commit to practicing during these moments, become aware that you're possessed by this emotion and make a strong decision, and have the resolve to commit to practice in those moments, in those very moments, maybe, if you can. Apply the techniques of meditation, using, the techniques to deal with emotion the way we deal with thought, because emotion is this amplified thought in a way, and more charged energy of thought, but it's the same thing. Go deeper into the practice, take refuge, whatever that means, I was talking about the Vajrayana teachings, which are almost a more esoteric, or I don't like using the word mysticism, but in some ways they are. But when you make a connection with the Vajra master, the Vajrayana teacher, these teachings are very powerful and have the potential to really transform. But they only come when you do take that kind of refuge, when you make that connection with the teacher on that, and officially take refuge, and the teacher is willing to offer you those teachings. The Vajrayana teachings don't exist without that student-teacher connection. They're not, accessible, really. They are, I guess, through books or something, but the actual juice of the teachings, if you will, can only be given and, transmitted through that connection you make with the teacher. And the last question for the day. Desire seems to be one of the primary fuels for social change, the desire for a specific outcome, like countering racism or curbing climate change. How would a Buddhist direct their desire for specific outcomes towards more skillful means? I think desire is that's maybe not the right word to use when you want to, counter racism. Desire, in terms of being a negative emotion, is when we talk about grasping at something, out of this very narrow-minded, fixated feeling. It could be lust sometimes, is that. What's the difference between lust and really falling in love with someone and wanting to make a connection? Those are two very different things in a way, right? The desire for, like wealth at any cost, at any expense, and the desire to have shelter or a nice place to, those are two different things. They're charged different ways. The desire for, devoting yourself to a social cause, an important social cause of social justice, like countering racism or curbing climate change, there's a wisdom in that, because it's about being of benefit to others. So I can't say that that's related to desire as much as it's related to, a very, to be a benefit to all beings. There's a wisdom to that. It's not just I don't find that to be a negative, driven by an emotion that's negative. So the word desire there is, you have to look at it from a different angle. Something like that can become negative when there's a zealousness to it, and it's, you're just so locked into this cause that you're, ignoring the suffering of others within it. You know what I mean? At any cost, where it becomes the desire to counter racism or whatever it is, or curb climate change. You're gonna, murder somebody else, or or you're gonna blow up, a factory or something and kill, 1,000 people in it. Well, that's, I wouldn't say compassionate activity per se, you know what I mean? But if your heart is saying, I want to devote myself to this certain cause because I believe in it, I want to bring benefit to all beings because of it, then I think that's very wise and, beneficial. Okay, we're going to wrap it up for today. I thank you all for being here. I really needed this today. Grateful for this sangha that you've all helped to create. And I'm grateful for our producer Nick Solidago, who, out of his kindness, generosity, makes this available to us. This, the means to do this. Let's dedicate our merit for today. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemy of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. We'll probably meet next Monday. I hope to see you then.